Shalom everyone. Today we'll try to do the last three halachot of this chapter because each one discusses a different way to look at the situation, meaning if there's a fire, is it causing damage to property or it might actually risk lives? And when the Talmud was written, they didn't have such a thing as the fire department, of course. Um, but they already knew how to blow out fires, and so it's also mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch, and something that is part of my very dark humor is that the Shulchan Aruch discusses this in Siman 334, which in Gematria is Shin Lamed Dalet, which means skeleton. And so, unfortunately, we don't want a skeleton to be remaining after a fire, but it just starts with Naflad L'Kab Shabbat. If a fire was on Shabbat, if it's at night before the meal, you can save three meals that are supposed to be that are appropriate for a person, and so for all the people who live in that house and their animals, and in the morning, if it's in the morning, only two, and at mincha only one, because they're not going to have to eat another meal until, we're worried more about rescuing them than about rescuing the food. So that's where it starts, and so let's see the three halachot. If a fire breaks out on Shabbat, the first question that must be addressed is whether it presents a danger to human life. If it does, there is a mitzvah to do whatever is necessary to extinguish it. However, if it is clear that there is no danger to human life, then even if the fire may cause extensive property damage, as is the case when an entire house goes up in flames, one may not put it out because monetary loss does not override Shabbat. And that's a rule, by the way, about all mitzvot. You're supposed to spend as much money as you need to prevent you from transgressing a mitzvah. And as far as I know, the law is not the same for a positive mitzvah, meaning you don't have to sell your house to buy an etrog for Sukkot, but you do have to try to get it. And I'm not sure what the parameters are, but in terms of a negative mitzvah, we're supposed to spend all our money um, and not transgress it. And there's so many stories in our past about how people who kept that law were successful afterwards. Specifically, Baron Rothschild, who was the robbers broke into his house, and he only gave them his own money, not any of the money that was deposited by him for safekeeping. So that's just another example. Furthermore, the sages prohibited moving items from a burning house to the street or courtyard even when there is an eruv. Their concern was that people might be so panicked about saving their property that they may either put out the fire or carry objects from a private domain to a public domain, thereby violating the malacha of hotza'ah, of carrying in from one domain to the other. Only food, clothing, and receptacles, implements needed for the Shabbat may be removed from a burning home, assuming it is within the eruv. If there is a large receptacle in the home, one may fill it with food, even if it is more than will be needed for that Shabbat, as long as it can be carried out of the home in one trip. The same principle applies to clothing, as long as one is wearing them as he leaves the house. You may save many items of clothing, even more than are necessary for the Shabbat. You can wear as many clothing you want on you. This prohibition only applies to moving things into a shared courtyard, but one may salvage any quantity of food and non-muktzah objects into a private yard where an eruv is not required, or into another apartment in the same building where there is an eruv. Just as a homeowner may save items that he needs for Shabbat, he may also tell his neighbors that they can take whatever they need, because when there's otherwise it will all be lost. Then they can also come and help themselves. Each neighbor can then take food for themselves for Shabbat and put on as many items of clothing as they can. After Shabbat, the custom of the pious is to return the salvaged clothing and items to the original owner. The poskim disagree about whether one may salvage money and valuables that are not necessary for Shabbat from a burning building. One who is lenient has an opinion on which to rely, what's called yesh lo al mei yismoch. However, this is all on the condition that he does not transgress a Torah prohibition. So money was not mentioned in the Torah, only in terms of taking it out from a private domain to a public domain. But the reason why it's muktzah is because when we pay something, we receive a receipt, and so we're not allowed to, even if the seller is a goy, we're not allowed to have them print a receipt or write a receipt for us. If in order to salvage his money, he would need to carry it from a private domain to a public domain, thus violating Torah law, he may not do so. However, he may carry the money out with a shinui, as this is only rabbinically prohibited. And so let's go to where there is danger to human life. By the way, human life is also pets. So just to make sure that we know that. In a situation where human life might be endangered by a fire, it is a mitzvah for anyone who can put it out to do so as soon as possible. Since danger to human life overrides Shabbat, even if the danger is uncertain, it is still a mitzvah to put out the fire. So, how do we not know for certain? Is because if the building is burning and there might be somebody in one of the apartments that didn't escape yet, or whatever, or was sleeping and such, then we have to do our best to save every life. And the Talmud even talks about other people that aren't related to us and animals, etc. For example, if a fire breaks out in a large building, even if it seems that all the residents managed to get out, one must put out the fire as long as there is a possibility that someone may still be inside. By the way, that is not mentioned in Shabbat, in Tractate Shabbat. It starts in Tractate Yoma, where it talks about a earthquake or some kind of collapsing of a building, that we remove the dirt and stones and wood until we reach every single person that could have been there. So if you don't know for sure, it says you dig as much as possible, even on Yom Kippur. And so again, that's how much we value life. Even if the odds are that anyone left inside has already died, since there is still a chance that a rescue is possible, everything must be done to put out the fire. Everything necessary must be done as efficiently as possible on all fronts. Those able to rescue people from the fire should try to do so, and those able to extinguish or control the fire should try to do so with whatever means are at their disposal. At the same time, others should call the fire department. And in terms of the fire department, especially outside of Israel, where most of the firefighters are non-Jewish, and there are also laws that tell us that we have to make sure that this fire doesn't spread. So, as far as I know, in North America, at all times, you're allowed to call the fire department, because if you're negligent to do so because you want to keep Shabbat, and then your neighbor's house burns down, you are liable. God forbid. Sorry, I shouldn't have said you, somebody. If an observer is uncertain whether the fire department has been called already, even if it seems likely that they have been, he too must call to make sure that they come, because the possibility of saving lives overrides Shabbat. At such a time, one must not ask a rabbi what to do, but rather move as quickly as possible to help. We'd rather err on the side of caution and do whatever we can. So, last one is a situation where people aren't in the building that's burning. And this is also applicable to other things, like if you see an electrical wire that fell on Shabbat, you are allowed to call whoever is needed to make sure that nobody is harmed. So, as we have seen, one who puts out a fire only transgresses rabbinically. According to most poskim, only one who extinguishes a fire in order to produce charcoal is doing so letzorach gufo, for the sake of its purpose. When one puts out a fire in order to prevent damage from occurring, he is not interested in the act of extinguishing, but in creating a situation in which the fire is gone. Accordingly, this is considered a melacha she'ena tzorcha gufa. Therefore, even though the sages insisted that one may not put out the fire in order to salvage property, they permitted extinguishing a fire that has the potential to cause mass injury. For example, if there's a burning ember in a public domain where many people are liable to be harmed by it, one may remove it even though it is muktzeh. If it is impossible to move it, the sages permitted extinguishing it in order to prevent harm to the public, even though there is no danger to human life. However, in Israel, one may not call the fire department because their travel involves Torah prohibitions, and one may not violate Torah law in order to prevent possible harm that does not involve potential loss of life. In the diaspora, where firefighters are not Jews, like we said, one may call the fire department as this only involves the violation of a rabbinic prohibition. And we'll stop here, and I just wanted to share one interesting story. The Talmud talks about that kol haktavim, all the scriptures, are allowed to be saved on Shabbat again, where there is an eruv, except for the book of Esther, because the book of Esther doesn't have Hashem's name in it. So, if I got the memory correctly, in January of 1980. We were living in the Gaza Strip, and we were all in shul, so there was no danger that anybody was going to be harmed. And there was a fire that caught on the couch, and when we cleared the fire and everything, we found that the only book that burned was the Book of Esther because it was lying on the couch. So anyway, good memories.